In the early hours of March 4th, 1945, a biting chill enveloped the soundscape of a German POW camp. The sky, an ominous palette of gray, surrendered only the faintest whispers of dawn, illuminating the frost-blanketed earth below. As the darkness began to recede, the distant rumble of a train echoed through the icy air, a reminder of the world still turning beyond the barbed wire fences. Inside the camp, the wind howled through the cracks of makeshift barracks, filled with weary American soldiers, their hearts heavy with despair, yet flickering with the tiniest ember of hope. Among them was Sergeant Jack Thompson, a resilient man with the resolve of a seasoned fighter. Having endured over a year of captivity, he had witnessed the brutality of war, etched deeply into the faces of his fellow prisoners, and yet, against all odds, he remained determined to survive. As the first glimmer of sunlight broke over the horizon, staining the snow in hues of muted gold, Jack stood near a wooden post, his breath crystallizing in the cold. A plan had begun to take shape in his mind, a whisper of rebellion amidst the routine of hopelessness. The camp guards, cold and weary themselves, expected little resistance from those they held captive. Little did they know that today would prove different. On this morning, the Germans would grow lax, lulled into a semblance of routine. Jack had seen it in their eyes. The weeks of relentless combat had worn them down. He exchanged furtive glances with a fellow American, an unspoken agreement hanging heavy in the air. This was not just a chance for freedom, but a gamble, one that could cost them their lives. Suddenly, the piercing clang of the watchtower bell rang out, signaling the change of guard. A young German guard, fresh-faced and oblivious to the weight of his role, peered down at the prisoners. For him, this was merely a job. For Jack, it was a moment hung in a delicate balance between freedom and despair. The guards had grown complacent. Today, perhaps, it could be exploited. As Jack counted each agonizing second, the railroad tracks shimmered in the periphery of his vision. The sound of the train steadily growing louder, intertwining with the hopes of those willing to brave the unknown. With a swift determination, reflective of a soldier who had fought through the darkest days of war, Jack made eye contact with his friend. The tension built, thick and suffocating. They would run soon, fueled by adrenaline and desperation, like a broken dam letting loose the floodwaters. In that instant, Jack realized the full weight of their gamble. This escape was not just a self-serving act. It was a testament to the resilience of the human spirit, of loved ones waiting at home, of camaraderie forged in the heat of strife. Each man was a testament to history, a story waiting to unfold. As the saccharine ribbons of sunlight streamed across the camp, their ultimate fate hung in the balance. Would they chance everything on this desperate bid for freedom? Or would the past, a cruel irony of war, trap them within the confines of their prison once more? The echoes of footsteps ushered in a moment of clarity, and amid the bitter cold of the dawn, their fate was set in motion. Jack's heart raced as he prepared to walk the thin line between freedom and capture. Years would pass before the ultimate truth surrounding this daring escape would be revealed, a truth intricately woven into the threads of loyalty, conflict, and unexpected compassion. As history often teaches, sometimes the true nature of our enemies surpasses the straightforward narrative of war, creating a tapestry rich with irony and humanity. The year was 1944, the air heavy with the scent of damp earth and smoke swirling around the confines of a distant prison camp in the heart of Germany. The sounds of distant artillery echoed softly, a constant reminder of the war raging beyond the fences. Within these barbed wire boundaries, hope lay buried under layers of despair. John Thompson, an American pilot, had known the thrill of flight. He had soared above enemy lines, his spirit unbroken, until his plane was brought down over hostile territory. Captured by German forces, John found himself an unwilling resident of a grim POW camp, where the reality of war unfolded with ruthless clarity. With each passing day, his resolve fluctuated. Was freedom merely a dream, or could he grasp it once more? Between the gray walls and the glum faces of his fellow captives, John nurtured the flickering flame of hope. He spent his nights tracing the stories of his comrades on the damp wooden bunk, conversations of freedom echoing like songs of old, filling the void of despair with whispers of resistance. His heart ached for the wide skies, the promise of dawn. And yet he knew that within those concrete walls, hope often felt futile. But amidst the rigid environment of the camp, there stood a man who appeared almost an anomaly. Wilhelm, a German guard, whose eyes betrayed a conflict that had no place in the war-torn world around them. Unlike his fellow sentinels, Wilhelm wore his uniform with a hesitance, as though the weight of his duty pressed down on him, causing the hardened edges of his loyalty to fray. Each time he walked through the camp, the tension simmering in the air ignited a spark of rebellion within him. The orders from his superiors often clashed with the humanity lurking beneath his stern exterior. As John observed Wilhelm, a realization struck him like a fierce gust of wind, a glimmer of understanding that perhaps not all enemies were devoid of sympathy. Here was a man caught between duty and conscience, a potential ally hidden beneath the silver insignia. With every fleeting interaction, John sensed an unspoken bond, one of mutual recognition of their shared human experience amid the inhumanity of war. Could one man's internal struggle lead to a path of freedom? Then came a pivotal moment that would tip the scales toward uncertainty and hope. One gray morning, in the depths of despair, John overheard a hushed conversation near the guard tower. "They want us to stop feeding the Americans," one guard growled, voice heavy with resentment. "Let them waste away until the war is over." John's heart raced at the implications of those words. If they were to follow through with such orders, he and his fellow prisoners faced a threatening reality. That evening, he stole a glance at Wilhelm. Their eyes meeting, a silent acknowledgement that spoke louder than any words. The tension seemed to crackle in the air. Wilhelm lowered his gaze, as if grappling with the weight of his burden, the cries of his conscience drowning out the call of duty. As the war raged and hunger threatened to sap the last remnants of hope from the camp, one question loomed larger than the others. What would drive an enemy to defy orders for the sake of humanity? Each day became a battle against despair. Every stolen glance and whispered word between John and Wilhelm formed a fragile thread of camaraderie, attempting to weave a tapestry of defiance against the shadows of conflict. In the heart of war, where loyalty was measured in bullets and betrayals, the inevitable clash between John's yearning for freedom and Wilhelm's haunting conflict of duty had begun. They were two souls on opposite sides of a bitter divide, yet somehow a fragile alliance started to form, promising a flicker of hope in the dark. as the world outside shifted and turned under the weight of destruction. John's spirit began to sway against the confines of his imprisonment, urging him toward an eventual resolution that neither could foresee. They were on the cusp of something extraordinary, a tale of loyalty and sacrifice, myths born from pain in a land torn by conflict. With bated breath, the days stretched on, and within them lingered the haunting question of what truly defined a hero against the backdrop of war. In the dim light of a late afternoon in spring 1945, shadows danced across the makeshift barracks of Stalag 7A, the air thick with tension and the metallic scent of blood and sweat. It was here, amidst the clatter of soldiers and the distant echoes of marching boots, that John Miller sat on the edge of his cot, burdened with the desperation of an entire year spent behind barbed wire. The prison camp was a crucible of fear and hope, where every whisper could mean freedom or death. The stakes were mounting. With each passing day, John felt the suffocating grip of despair tighten around him. The war was nearing its end. Rumors swirled of impending liberation, but the fear of being executed as a traitor kept him locked in a cycle of trepidation. To escape was to defy fate, and perhaps even God. It was on this uneasy precipice that he met Wilhelm, the unlikely German guard who had become both friend and foe. During their stolen conversations, John learned that Wilhelm was a man of duality, caught in the brutal gears of a regime he no longer believed in. The difference in their ideologies became a tightrope they balanced upon, each step building a precarious friendship forged in desperation. "Do you ever wonder why we are fighting?" Wilhelm had asked one evening, his gaze distant, as if peering into a horizon of lost hopes. The twilight cast a haunting light over their small clearing, illuminating the shadows of uncertainty that passed between them. "It's not the fighting that matters, Wilhelm. It's the fact that we're both stuck in this nightmare," John replied, his voice thick with emotion. The shared burden of their predicament drew them closer. Two souls linked by the pervasive fear of capture and execution. They were pivoting in a history where alliances could shift like the wind. As the days transformed into a blur, they began planning the escape, an act fraught with risk and devotion. Each conversation turned into a blueprint, layered with the complexity of trust, a dance on the knife's edge. John nervously sketched routes across tattered papers, while Wilhelm kept watch, his eyes darting anxiously between the horizon and the looming sentinel of authority. They understood that if they were caught, it would mean execution, a sentence compounded by betrayal. "I could take you to the woods," Wilhelm suggested one night, the moon lighting the darkened path ahead like a beacon of hope. "But it won't be easy. They'll hunt for you." "And what about you?" John questioned, his heart racing with the unease of testing loyalty. "You could be executed for helping me. Why would you risk everything?" For a moment, silence enveloped them. Wilhelm's expression was chiseled with conviction. "Because I cannot stand by and watch innocent men suffer. It is my duty and my choice," he confessed. His words carried the weight of a man wrestling between loyalty to his country and his intrinsic morality, a dichotomy that revealed the deep cracks within the oppressive structure around them. With each new revelation, both men felt the tension coil tighter, the imminent danger looming like a storm cloud overhead. They were entwined in a dangerous pact, promising to share their lives, their dreams, and the haunting shadows that walked with them. It was a commitment that teetered on the brink, each moment laden with uncertainty. In the following days, whispers and furtive glances became their new language, a silent pact in the face of desperation. As John prepared to risk everything for freedom, his resolve grew stronger. He longed for sunlight beyond the barbed wire, for a world that still pulsed with life outside of cold steel and grim duty. The escape now stood as both a liberation and a reckoning. As the camp's oppressive sounds faded into the backdrop, John and Wilhelm knew that the time for action was fast approaching. In the heart of darkness, they dared to dream the impossible, even if it meant a fateful encounter that would alter their lives forever. In this uncertain shadow of war, the question loomed larger than life. Could two men, bound by circumstance but divided by duty, survive against all odds? And would their fragile alliance stand the test of treachery that awaited just beyond the gates of Stalag Sevathie? The evening chill of January 18, 1945, settled like a shroud over the sprawling compound of Stalag 9C, where every shadow seemed to mock the flickering hope of the prisoners within its barbed wire confines. A full moon cast a pale light across the frozen ground, illuminating jagged outlines of guard towers and the silhouettes of patrolling sentries. The atmosphere crackled with palpable tension, every breath an echo of fear and determination. Inside the barracks, John Reynolds paced silently among the other prisoners, his heart beating a frantic rhythm against the walls of his chest. He had waited for this moment for months, months filled with whispered plans, covert glances, and the everyday peril of being caught in the act. Not a day passed without the reality of war heavy upon them, each sunrise a reminder that they were mere pawns, swept away by forces beyond their control. But tonight, everything could change. Across from him stood Wilhelm, the unlikely ally who, against the tide of camaraderie forged in dire conditions, had quietly chosen a different path. The German Guard had grown increasingly disillusioned with the war and the way it twisted the souls of men. As he looked at John's determined expression, he remembered the humanity they shared in the darkest days, those moments of laughter traded over small gestures of kindness that, in turn, spoke volumes. It was a dangerous bond, but it was one that could tip the scales in John's favor. As night deepened, Wilhelm sent a subtle signal. A light flickered momentarily in the guardhouse, a sign that the next shift had begun. The other guards, lulled by routine, wouldn't notice the absence, yet their vigilance remained acute. Time was running short. With a heavy heart, Wilhelm made a choice that would forever mark him as both a protector and a traitor. He approached John, voice barely above a whisper. "Now, you must go, before they notice." John's eyes widened, a rush of conflicting emotions flooding through him. The weight of the world pressed down as he clenched the small piece of paper with the hastily drawn map of the camp. The escape route hovered in the deep folds of his mind. He understood the stakes. Freedom for him could mean imprisonment, or worse, for Wilhelm. Yet John's spirit soared at the flicker of hope ignited by Wilhelm's trust. He nodded, squeezing Wilhelm's shoulder briefly before peeling away into the darkness. Stealthily, John navigated the perilous confines of the camp, heart thundering in time, with his footsteps crunching against the frostbitten earth. Every barrier crossed, the wire fences, the patrolling guards, felt like the trials of an ancient epic. his every move a calculated dance with fate. He soon reached the edge of the forest that bordered the camp's perimeter, the entrance to which loomed ahead like an opportunity wrapped in shadow. Just then, the sharp call of a sentry broke the stillness of the night, echoing through the bitter air. Adrenaline surged. John knew he had mere seconds before everything could unravel. Suddenly, in a courageous act of defiance, Wilhelm dashed toward the line of sight between John and the guard. He raised his hands, feigned a stumble, and clumsily retreated, effectively distracting the sentry. It was a risk that pressed upon him like cold steel. Every second counted. John pushed forward, spotting an opening in the dense underbrush. He could hear the muffled shouts behind him, fear and fury intermingled. Would he make it? He cast one last glance back. The image of Wilhelm standing defiantly against the looming danger seared into his mind. Strengthened by that bravery, he plunged into the shadows of the woods, each step taking him further from the iron grasp of captivity. As he sprinted deeper into the thicket, the weight of uncertainty pulled at him. Out here, the cold was biting, yet it felt like liberation. Behind him, Wilhelm bore the burden of betrayal, while guarding the possibility of simpler tomorrows for both of them. In that moment, each frozen breath carried a sense of irony, the tensions of two worlds clashing, as one man risked everything to set another free. This night of fear, of chilling uncertainty, had transformed into a heartbeat of rebellion, with hope illuminating the way through the darkness. The chase had begun, and whatever awaited John beyond those woods, the reverberations of that choice would echo through the years, shaping the lives of all involved. John slipped through the creaking gate, his heart pounding like thunder against the vastness of the night. It was the early hours of March 14th, 1945, with the air still thick with the scent of wet earth and the distant echo of artillery fading like a heartbeat. The world beyond those relentless prison walls was dark and uncertain, yet filled with the whispering promise of freedom. He had finally done it. After months of planning, nights spent tracing his escape route within the confines of his cell, he was free. Yet, exhilaration twisted painfully in his chest, for a shadow of sorrow danced in the corners of his mind. What lay ahead? With every cautious step, John felt the weight of the heartbreak of his fellow POWs pressing against him. They had become brothers, temporarily tied together by their suffering, their shared laughter, their whispered horrors, all now left behind in the suffocating silence of the camp. Freedom was intoxicating, yet he was haunted by the knowledge that so many remained trapped in a cycle of despair. Meanwhile, Wilhelm stood on the lookout tower, the cold wind biting at his cheeks as he grappled with a turmoil of feelings. His decision to help John escape had been laced with sleepless nights and quiet desperation. Now, watching the American disappear into the dark, he questioned everything he had believed in. Had he betrayed his duty, his country? Wilhelm's heart wavered as uncertainty gnawed at him like a relentless predator. As John trudged through the mud, branches cracking underfoot, each sound throbbed in his ears like a warning bell. He could hear the faint stir of the camp behind him, the rustling of guards, the grumbling of hungry prisoners. What if they discovered him gone? What if the echoes of the past caught up with him? Each query clawed at his spirit, yet the thought of remaining a prisoner was even more daunting. Wilhelm lowered his binoculars, the moonlight glinting off his faithful rifle. Betrayal or loyalty? Realities blurred as he recalled John's quiet resolve, the way he held on to hope through the darkest days. Wilhelm wasn't just a guard. He had become a witness to humanity through the eyes of those he guarded. The war had changed him profoundly, forcing him to reconcile the actions of man with the shadows they cast. In the quietude of night, John paused. He scanned the vast, open fields spread before him, where winds whispered of infinite possibilities. And yet, uncertainty was his only companion. Would he find those who sought to help him? Would he taste the sweet fruits of freedom, or be chased back into the jaws of captivity? As he pressed forward, each step echoed like a drumbeat in his heart, resonant with the question that fueled his desperation. Was his escape a bitter victory, or the beginning of a new life? Wilhelm clenched his fist around the rifle, torn between his duty and growing doubt. For him, the decision had been both a betrayal and a lifeline. It was a choice that would resonate within him, a pulse of guilt mixed with fleeting solace as John disappeared into the night, a fleeting glimpse of freedom painted with shades of melancholy. With each moment that passed, John felt the exhilarating and bitter taste of freedom wash over him, a reminder that even in survival, the scars of the past would remain. He pressed on into the unknown, the shadows fading behind him, and ahead lay the faint glimmer of hope, a fragile light guiding him forward. In the late afternoon light of June 15, 1965, a steady breeze swept through the halls of the state capitol in New Hampshire. The hum of daily activities buzzed softly, but within his office, John Thompson sat in stillness, the weight of the years pressing heavily upon his shoulders. At 60, with streaks of gray settling in his hair, he often found himself lost in reflection, haunted by memories of war that lingered like shadows in a quiet room. There had been a time when adrenaline fueled every moment of his life, when survival was a day-to-day concern, and bravery was measured by the scarred skin of a soldier. Yet now, a different kind of battle raged within him. He was not just a war hero. He was a senator, a man tasked with guiding a nation still grappling with the ashes of conflict. He picked up a letter, yellowed and creased, that had surfaced unexpectedly in a box of old correspondence. The return address sent a ripple of anxiety through him. It was from Wilhelm, the German guard who had risked everything to set him free all those years ago. As John unfolded the letter, the distinct scent of aging paper filled the air, the smell of history, of choices made in moments of desperation. What had Wilhelm written that warranted revisiting such a past? Words jumped off the page, revealing the unspoken truths buried beneath layers of time and sacrifice. "I did what I had to," the letter began, penned in careful script. "You may never understand the weight of that decision, but you must know that my actions were not driven solely by compassion. In a world turned upside down by war, sometimes morality becomes a fragile line, easily blurred in the face of loyalty to a flag, or the bond between brothers." Each line echoed a complex reality that war tended to simplify. Heroes and villains didn't wear such clear distinctions. John remembered the fear in Wilhelm's eyes the day he opened the gate, and the quiet resolve that had guided his hand. By choosing to help an enemy soldier escape, Wilhelm had crossed boundaries that were meant to separate duty from humanity. The warmth of the sun streamed through the window, illuminating dust motes swirling in the air, a stark contrast to the chilling atmospheres of war. "I had my reasons," Wilhelm continued. You were one of many, but you were the one I could not leave to die. Fear coursed through me every day, watching men sacrifice their lives for ideologies that seldom served human needs. John leaned back in his chair, the words resonating in the stillness of the room. The unspoken truth weighed heavily, the realization that even in conflict there were men like Wilhelm, who questioned the righteousness of their actions, men who saw the fragility of life beyond the battlefield. This cascade of understanding transformed John's perspective, from soldier to statesman, echoing the importance of empathy in a world often eager to forget the humanity in its enemies. His heart ached at the thought of their parallel lives. Where John had fought for freedom, Wilhelm had sought to protect what little humanity remained in war. Their connection, forged in chaos, was now intertwined in the delicate fabric of remembrance and forgiveness. As the afternoon waned, shadows crept across his office, and the implications grew clearer. A single choice, made in one moment of vulnerability, rippled through time, affecting the lives of many. John reflected on the weight of such decisions. In the end, was it the actions that defined a man, or was it the motivations behind them? Years later, he understood. It was the truth rendering deep into the human soul, an unbridgeable chasm, yet somehow filled with threads of understanding. Here was a chance for growth, to craft a narrative not just for himself or his nation, but for any soldier who ever found themselves standing at the intersection of duty and mercy. John realized that no soldier's story was isolated. All were parts of a greater, intricate design, one that spoke to the complexities of humanity caught in the throes of war. The letter, now resting in his hand, was more than just ink on paper. It was a bridge across their shared past, a testament to choices made under fire. As the day turned into night, John folded the letter carefully, resolved to honor the memory of not just his own struggles, but Wilhelm's as well. In the final analysis of their lives, perhaps it was the realization that the lines between right and wrong were far more nuanced than they dared to believe. In moments of chaos, often, it is our shared humanity that leads us home. As the sun began to set on a crisp autumn evening, John sat in the shadow of the Berlin Wall, the weight of decades pressing heavy on his soul. The memories of war, the sounds of gunfire, and the cries of men echoed in his mind. Today was not just another day. It was a journey toward understanding, forgiveness, and perhaps closure. He looked at the carefully folded letter in his hand, an invitation from Wilhelm's family. There was a hint of anguish in their words, but also a longing for conversation. They sought to explain the choices their father had made during that tumultuous time. John felt an ache in his heart. Years had passed, yet the bonds of war held tightly to both of their lives. As John approached Wilhelm's home, he was struck by the tranquility that surrounded the neighborhood. The streets, once echoing with the sounds of soldiers and bombs, were now filled with laughter from children and the scent of fresh bread wafting through the air. He hesitated for a moment, thoughts swirling. Would they see him as the enemy, or the man Wilhelm had saved? Inside the modest yet welcoming home, he was greeted by Wilhelm's widow, Greta, whose eyes bore the history of loss, strength, and sorrow. The room was adorned with photographs, images of a life lived in simple joys, haunted by the memories of a war that had torn them apart. John felt the gravity of their shared past as they settled into the living room. the atmosphere thick with unspoken feelings. "Thank you for coming," Greta said softly, her voice laced with emotion. "We've wanted to tell you what Wilhelm went through after the war." John nodded, eager yet apprehensive. He could sense the weight of Wilhelm's choices pressing against the walls that surrounded them. As Greta began to recount the family's history, she spoke of a man tormented by his revolutionary actions during the war. A man who had to live with the moral conflict of saving John's life while betraying his comrades. Wilhelm had been branded a traitor, ostracized from the very country he had sworn to protect. His conscience awoke a fire within him, forcing him to reassess everything he once believed. "We didn't understand it at first," Greta continued, her voice trembling. "He was haunted by the idea that he had turned his back on his own. But in saving you, John, he found a semblance of peace, a way to reconcile the man he once was with the man he became." John listened intently, the layers of their relationship unfolding like the pages of a long-forgotten book. He began to understand the sacrifices made, the consequences that lingered long after peace was declared. The war had forged an unbreakable bond between two men from opposing sides, a connection born not from gunfire, but from the weight of human compassion. As the conversation flowed, John found himself reflecting, grappling with his own feelings of loyalty and the nature of sacrifice. How simple it had once been to label enemies and heroes, yet here, in this room, the lines blurred. He understood now that Wilhelm's choice, albeit born of fear and hope, had changed the course of his life and, in some small way, aimed to mend the fractured past. The evening grew darker, their dialogue transforming into a heartfelt conversation filled with shared pain and understanding. John felt a warm sensation rise within him, an emotional release as he expressed the gratitude that lingered in his heart for years. There was power in forgiveness, a balm for wounds that had never truly healed. In that intimate space, generations of conflict began to soften, giving way to compassion. As they shared tears for the lives lost and dreams unfulfilled, John realized that closure was not merely a destination, but rather a journey. As the night deepened, they embraced the complexities of their shared history. Forging an unexpected kinship, two families intertwined through the choices of one man, a testament to the enduring power of empathy and understanding. And in that moment, John knew he had discovered something profound. Forgiveness born from love could illuminate even the darkest paths of the past. In this healing embrace, they found the strength to move forward, united by stories that blended wartime valor with humanity. As twilight descended upon the small town of Brookfield, Pennsylvania, on a crisp autumn evening in 1975, John sat on his porch, a steaming cup of coffee cradled in his hands. The leaves rustled softly in the gentle breeze, whispering secrets of the past, a past that John could never quite escape. In the calmness of the dusk, his memories danced vividly before him, the barbed wire fences, the cold, unforgiving walls of the POW camp, and the face of the German guard who had changed everything. In that moment, with time stretching endlessly before him, John considered the bonds formed amid the chaos of war, an unexpected connection that transcended enemy lines. He had spent countless nights in darkness, haunted by the horrors he witnessed, yet also illuminated by the flicker of humanity he found in an unlikely ally. As the years blurred together, the lessons learned from the ordeal became clearer, crystallizing in his heart like the first stars appearing in the evening sky. He recalled the night of his escape, the frantic heartbeat pounding in his ears, paired with the echo of his footsteps fleeing an uncertain future. A shared glance with the guard, whose eyes betrayed a sense of understanding and compassion, ignited a spark of hope within him. What drove that soldier to make the choice he did? John spent decades pondering the reasons, a soldier himself, grappling with the enigma of loyalty versus morality in the face of brutality. Years later, John found himself at a veterans' reunion, surrounded by men who had once been enemies but were now comrades in arms, united by the shared burden of their experiences. Their stories intertwined, revealing the profound impact of war, not only on the battlegrounds, but within the depths of human spirit. With laughter and tears, they embraced the notion that even in the darkest of times, a thread of compassion can weave its way through despair, binding souls together in unexpected ways. As the sun dipped beneath the horizon, John reflected on how that thread continued to stretch beyond his time as a POW. He could see it woven into the lives of those soldiers he had met, creating moments of kindness, even when such gestures seemed futile. They had all witnessed the fragility of life and the strength shown in acts of humanity. It was more than mere survival. It was a testament to the resilience of the human heart. John took a deep breath, allowing the crisp autumn air to fill his lungs, familiar scents of fallen leaves mingling with memories long cherished. War may forge division, but it also ignites understanding. The complexities of life intertwined in a delicate balance, shaping him into who he had become. A man proud of his past, yet hopeful for a future nurturing empathy. In that serene moment, John understood that the true battles of life extended far beyond the front lines. They resided within the choices people made, the compassion they offered amidst struggle, and the legacy they chose to leave behind. John lifted his cup in a silent toast to the German guard who had given him a chance at freedom, a reminder of the profound impact of simple acts of humanity that could resonate through time. With a heart full of gratitude, he knew that these reflections would continue to echo through generations, a quiet legacy of understanding forged in the fires of war. The past may have cast a long shadow, but within it lay the light of hope, illuminating the necessity of compassion, even in the direst of straits.